Hi, this is Karen Gaines, owner of Plenty of Sense LLC, and today I'm going to talk about two things I see that are commonly overlooked by many nonprofit organizations. All right, so let's get to it. So, number one is cash reserves, and just discussing cash reserves. That is just generally not talked about very much with a lot of nonprofit organizations. And there are different reasons for that. Some nonprofits have an abundance of cash, and they have like more cash they know what to, more cash than they know what to do with. And if you're an executive director watching, you're in that position, that is fantastic. Consider yourself blessed. But then others, they just really don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about not having cash reserves. They may feel uncomfortable doing it, or they may just be barely getting by, and the thought of even talking about cash reserves is just, it's a little bit too much, okay? There's no game plan put together. And then, some nonprofits act like, it's not even an issue or a problem, okay? But, I do believe all nonprofits should have some type of reserve. Now, in my opinion, I think nonprofits should have at least 3 months of operating expenses as reserves, okay? And, that may be different for each nonprofit. And what you have to do is determine what cash reserve amount is best for you. And you may have to get with your board of directors, have a conversation, and determine, okay, this is the amount of cash reserves we should have on hand, and and that's that. Okay. And cash reserves, like building cash reserves, can take time. This is not something that's going to take like 1 month, 2 months. It like honestly might take a few years. Okay. It takes time to build those type of reserves. So if you don't have any like little to no reserves, my recommendation would be to get with your board and think of ways to raise extra cash so that you can get those reserves in place, so that you'll have that extra cash for a rainy day, or if something unexpected happens, or if you lose funding, or the list kind of goes on and on. If you have been part of the nonprofit industry, things come up all the time. Okay. Number two thing I see overlooked by nonprofit organizations is having a disaster plan, or some type of contingency plan. And here's what I mean by that. That means, asking the hard questions, asking the what if questions, and then coming up with solutions. And I feel like, it would be good for the board to be involved in this process as well. So this is more so asking yourself, excuse me, asking yourself the question, what if a major funding source just all of a sudden goes away? What's the contingency plan? Or what if the executive director, gets sick and can't perform, or quits the current nonprofit, and, goes to another nonprofit or another job or whatnot? Or what if there is a pandemic? Or what if a key person on the team, like all of a sudden leaves the organization? Is asking like those hard and, probable scenarios, asking the hard questions and coming up with those scenarios that could happen, and then creating a game plan for those scenarios, those kind of, bad scenarios that may happen. So, you're not caught off guard when it does happen. Now, can you anticipate all problems? No. Now, you cannot anticipate everything. And I'm sure most people did not anticipate the pandemic that happened a few years ago. But it is good to have some type of plan in place so you're at least somewhat prepared for something. Okay? So, while these conversations may be uncomfortable, talking about cash reserves and talking about coming up with contingency plans, I think, at some point or another, if you and your board is not having these conversations, it would be good to have these conversations. So hopefully you learned something in this video. Hopefully it was helpful for you. Make sure you click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you later. All right, thanks, and bye.